So I came across this gem of a video the other day attesting to the efficacy of the Book of Mormon. This is going to be really interesting. Let's get into it.
Joseph Smith claimed that he translated the Book of Mormon from a set of golden plates that were given to him by an angel. After the translation was complete, Joseph said he returned the plates to the angel, making them unavailable today for examination. This account may come across as a little too convenient and lead you to wonder, is there any evidence that the plates existed at all?
Exactly what I was thinking. Is there evidence that they existed at all? Before we actually address the evidence, I want to talk about forms of evidence that I will not accept. I will not accept eyewitness testimony. In a court of law, eyewitness testimony is viewed as the most reliable. In science, it's the least reliable form. When we're trying to get to the truth of a matter, eyewitness testimony is 100% worthless. Even in a court of law, stories change as time goes on, especially what's called flashbulb memories. Flashbulb memories are extremely vivid snapshots of an event. There was a study published in Scientific American about 9/11. Some people who were there to witness it were interviewed about the incident at intervals of 1 week, 1 year, and 3 years after it happened. Unsurprisingly, as time went on, the people interviewed recounted completely different stories from their original stories when interviewed the first week. Memory and eyewitness testimony is an unacceptable form of evidence. It shouldn't convince anybody. Now, with that being said, let's continue.
Introduced at the beginning of every copy of the Book of Mormon are the testimonies of the 3 and 8 witnesses.
Okay, we're like 15 seconds into this video and I already have a problem. We're basing this off of eyewitness testimony, but I'm assuming there's going to be more evidence, so let's continue.
These 3 witnesses, Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and Martin Harris, wrote that they were shown the plates by an angel, who also attested to them that Joseph Smith translated the book by the gift and power of God. It would be easy to say that these 3 men conspired with Joseph Smith, only giving their testimony of the angel and the gold plates to perpetuate a scam. But that explanation loses its strength when we consider that all 3 men eventually left the church, having at some point fallen out with Joseph Smith. Oliver Cowdery and Martin Harris later rejoined the church after Smith's death, but David Whitmer would remain estranged for the rest of his life.
First of all, if an angel physically appeared to me and told me that some dude had some golden tablets and that they were legit, I would never leave the church. I literally just got a physical message from God that this guy is like his chosen dude. It couldn't be much clearer. Based on the fact that they left the church, it seems to me that these guys weren't completely convinced by the personal, physical message from God. You know, in everyday life, we don't accept shit like this. If somebody came up to you and told you that he had these 3 people with him who will back him up when he says that Jesus gave him the ability to speak a new language, gave him a book, and told him to translate it, but you aren't allowed to see the book, we would think he was delusional. We wouldn't accept that. Religion does something really interesting to our minds. It makes us ignore logic and reason. Think about it. An all-powerful, all-knowing God creates people and puts a tree in the middle of a garden and says, don't eat it. Then when they do eat it, he has to put in place this master plan to sacrifice himself to appease himself. Why was the sacrifice necessary? Since when can somebody die in place of a murderer to atone for their murder, so the murderer gets to go free? Couldn't he have just forgiven them? And didn't he know they were going to eat it from the get-go since he's all-knowing? Why did he put it there in the first place? It would be like a parent putting a child in a room with a bunch of food, but some of the food was laced with rat poison. Why would any good parent do that? Religion makes us accept things which we wouldn't otherwise accept. Okay, sorry for that little tirade. Let's move on.
Despite their falling out with Smith, all 3 maintained their testimony of having seen the angel and the gold plates. In fact, David Whitmer famously went out of his way on numerous occasions to give interviews and correct newspapers he felt had misrepresented his testimony. Once he wrote, "Those who know me best know that I have always adhered to that testimony, and that no man may be misled or doubt my present views in regards to the same. I do again affirm the truth of my statements."
Well, unfortunately, the sources he listed to prove what he's saying is correct are non-existent. He does have links in his description to quote-unquote sources, but they just bring you to some Mormon website. That means they're 100% untrustworthy to me. They have an open bias.
The fact that these men never wavered in their testimony of the plates dismantles the claim of collusion. After all, They had everything to lose and nothing to gain by maintaining their testimonies after falling away from the church.
No, it doesn't dismantle the claim. And to clarify, I'm not claiming it's collusion. I am, however, endorsing one possible explanation for what happened. I don't accept your claim that it was divine intervention. And to answer your question, they had their reputation to lose. That's one possible reason why they would have maintained their statements. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You still haven't proven to me that he maintained his claim that an angel came to him and told him Joseph Smith's plates were legit.
And yet, each, independently of the others, insisted that their published testimony was true, whatever their disagreements with Joseph Smith may have been. With collusion being highly unlikely,
Collusion is not highly unlikely.
others have questioned whether the three witnesses could have been hallucinating. Some sources quote the witnesses as saying that they saw the plates with their spiritual eyes, or with the eye of faith, which some take to mean they only imagined the plates and the angel. But that sort of language is scriptural in nature, and doesn't automatically imply hallucination.
Whoa. You're telling me that the claim is that they saw the plates with their spiritual eye? Wow. Do I even need to address this? Okay, I'll let the man speak. Go ahead.
Rather, it means that the witnesses were prepared for a visionary experience in the scriptural sense.
Why don't you go ahead and give us your interpretation of something somebody said 2 centuries ago?
David Whitmer made this clear in an interview published in 1888. Of course, we were in the spirit when we had a view of the plates. For no man can behold the face of an angel except in a spiritual view, but we were in the body also, and everything was as natural to us as it was at any time. Whitmer insisted that he was not under any hallucination during the vision, saying, "I saw with these eyes."
Okay, so the dude basically said, of course we saw it in a spiritual sense. Nobody can see the face of an angel physically, but our bodies still existed. It sounds to me like he's admitting that he imagined the whole thing. Seriously, how else am I supposed to take that? He's actually saying that they didn't physically see an angel.
One might still not be convinced by the witness given by Cowdery, Harris, and Whitmer, thinking it sounds too ethereal with an angel showing them the plates. This is where the testimony of the 8 witnesses comes in, as they were given the simple, straightforward opportunity to handle the plates directly. No angel arrayed in glorious light is described by Oliver Cowdery. They simply wrote that, "As many of the leaves as the said Smith has translated, we did handle with our hands, and we also saw the engravings thereon, all of which has the appearance of ancient work and of curious workmanship."
Here's an interesting bit of trivia about the Mormon Church. For those of you who aren't familiar with their beliefs and teachings, they basically believe that Joseph Smith found some golden plates buried in the ground, which were placed there by an angel for him to find centuries or millennia later. He also had a seer stone, which was used to interpret what was on the plates. So he'd put the plate in his hat, drop the stone in, and then put his face up to his hat to read them. He used the same confidence trick for all kinds of other stuff throughout his life, including finding buried treasure for people. And upon arriving at some location, he'd claim there was a spiritual hex on it. If they tried to retrieve it, it would sink further into the ground. It was lost forever. Now comes the interesting part. His wife didn't believe him about the plates. So this dude asks to borrow the first 116 pages of what he had quote-unquote translated. He loans them to the dude, and the dude says, "Now, if you're really translating those plates, retranslate the part I stole, and I'll believe you." Supposedly his wife was in on the whole thing. Of course he couldn't, so he claimed that those writings were lost forever. Who is convinced of this shit? Seriously. This is ridiculous. Religion makes people suspend their reasoning skills. I'm doing everything I can to wake people up to this. It's surprisingly hard to do. Now, all that being said, they have 8 people from 200 years ago who claim to have carried these plates around. I'm gonna go ahead and say I don't believe it.
Once again, collusion is unlikely, given that 3 of the 8 witnesses were either excommunicated or left the church. And as with the 3 witnesses, they never recanted their testimony as published in the Book of Mormon.
What does that have to do with it? Even if they never recanted, I would not be surprised to find out that the people never even existed. He forged a letter from them or something, saying that they carried them around for him. Or that he covered something up in a sheet so they couldn't see what they were carrying in the first place. There are a billion possible explanations for what happened, and Mormons are choosing to believe the least likely of all of them.
To explain the testimony of the 8 witnesses, some think that Joseph Smith fabricated a set of tin or lead plates that he used to trick them with. However, There is no credible historical evidence that Joseph Smith somehow faked a set of plates, let alone that he had the wherewithal to do so.
We don't need credible evidence that these plates were faked. The default position is disbelief. You have to prove to me that the plates existed in the first place, since you're the one making the claim. That's how a burden of proof works. This guy's trying to prove that they existed by making me prove that they were faked. When I can't produce faked plates, he defaults to believing that the real ones existed at some point. That's not how logical thought works.
Martin Harris, before he became one of the 3 witnesses, held the plates while they were in a wooden chest, and knew that they must have been either lead or gold.
How could he know that? It couldn't have been filled with beets, or something equally as heavy? Did he physically look inside? You're telling me that nobody has ever physically seen these golden plates, except for Joseph Smith. You must be embarrassed by this claim. There is no way around it.
But Riley added that Joseph had not enough credit to buy so much lead. This theory also ignores the testimony of those who saw the angel. If we only had the testimony of the 3 witnesses, you might be able to dismiss their vision as a hallucination. And if we only had the testimony of the 8 witnesses, you might be able to say that they were being tricked by bogus plates. But combined, their testimonies support the claim that Joseph not only had plates with the appearance of gold, but also that those plates were divinely given.
Whoa, hold on. How did we arrive at that? How can we say they were divinely given? You tried to slip that right in there, didn't you? No. You just been trying to establish that they existed in the first place. You never said a word about them being divine. And the weak claims of 2 sets of people who never actually saw the plates themselves does not establish that they ever existed. As a side note, I love to know why the Book of Mormon was written by a 17th century man translating plates from Egyptian into 15th century Old English reminiscent of the King James Bible. I'm leaving that for part 2. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Patreon. Sources and links are in the description. Thanks for watching.